Hello, we're rolling into another episode of Psych Chat here at Men's Radio Station. As usual, in each episode, I'll talk to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well being. My brilliant guest for today is a psychodynamic counselor and a creative entrepreneur, Margareth Van Steenlandt. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much. I'm really pleased to be here with you.
Okay, so Margaret, just give us a quick trajectory of your life. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you came up doing what you're doing.
So actually, I was born in Paris, so I'm French, but my background is very much international because I was raised in an international context in Paris, and my mother tongue languages are English and French. So I was really lucky to be raised in an international environment and context, an international school and bilingual school. So all my friends at the time were from all over the world, and I used to speak English and French nearly in the same sentence. So that was a bit weird for French people at the time. So that's my background, really international and raised in a very multicultural environment in Paris. And I will go to the US every year. So I was really lucky about that as well. And I moved to London in my early 30s. I moved to London and I felt immediately at home in London, thanks to its multiculturalism and the fact that I feel that English is really a language I feel better with emotionally. So the way you behave in English or in French depends on the mentality, and because mentalities, depending on the culture, are very different. Obviously, I like the way I speak emotionally in English. So I felt really good in London. So now I work in London and in Paris, and I've decided to become an expat coach and an integrative counselor. So for two different reasons. An expat coach, obviously, because I'm so passionate about differences in culture and the way people may respond differently when they move abroad and depending on the mentality at a specific time in the host country. And integrative counselor, because I was fascinated about psychology when I was actually a kid. And I read at the time, I read a lot of Freud's books, and my mother got sick, unfortunately, when I was a teenager for about 6 years, and I needed to understand her in a better way, and just, I needed to understand her psychologically, and that really helped me a lot at the time. And but in France, because at the time I was living in France, psychology was not seen, was seen more like a hobby, not something that you will do professionally. It wasn't that widespread. And moving to London, I realized that actually I could become a counselor or a therapist. And that's the reason why I decided to be trained as a psychodynamic therapist in London.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's really a colorful background, but I'll talk more about later about your experience as a coach and as a counselor. Now, I understand, Margaret, you also have your own company, is that right? Or you work as a small...
Absolutely. Actually, I had my own company in London, but that was in totally different field. I had set up a company based on cultural events in London and in Paris. So actually, the company was set up in London, but the activities were in London and in Paris. So I was already an entrepreneur back then. And then when I was trained as a psychological therapist, for different personal reasons, I had about 3 years ago to move to Paris. So now that's the reason why I work between Paris and London. And I decided to set up my company, which is Polychromatic Life Design, and as a coach, as a counselor, and as a speaker as well, because I give talks in London and in Paris mainly. psychological topics.
Mm-hmm. Mhm. And so basically, what's your kind of mission as an entrepreneur, as a psychodynamic counselor? What would you say your mission?
Well, a mission as a coach and counselor obviously is to help the well-being of people, whatever their background, whatever the culture, whatever their religion, whatever their sexual orientation, is really about. As a coach, would you like me to explain maybe the differences between being a coach and a counselor?
Yeah, yes, something that probably a lot of our listeners get confused. What's the
Yeah,
difference between a
absolutely.
coach and a counselor and a psychotherapist?
Absolutely. And there are main differences, really. I explained that clearly right in the very first session. So my clients do understand the differences. So as a coach, it's more about setting goals together, specific goals in a specific space of time. So usually from 5 to 8 or 10 sessions, depending on the goals. And the aim is to achieve these goals, giving I use cognitive therapy actually, using cognitive tips to help the person understand themselves, himself or herself better, but also achieving these goals in a specific space of time.
Now, for you mentioned about cognitive behavioral therapy, but for the benefit of those listening to us, could you just give us a quick rundown of what is cognitive behavioral therapy is and who does it work for?
Well, as a coach, the way I use it, because it's different when you're a cognitive therapist, it's a bit different when you're a CBT therapist. But as a coach, when I use this, it's more about exercises that I do give. It's about reframing your brain differently so that you can achieve your goals. So it's really about working on shaping your brain differently, understanding your behavior with specific exercises as well, specific questions that may help you later on. So it's a bit more oriented and solution oriented. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And who do you usually work with this? Do you work with couples, or do you work with, you mentioned earlier that you work with expats, so who else do you work with?
Well, expats obviously is from different backgrounds. And I work with adults. I don't work with kids because I wasn't trained to be able to work with kids. What I do though is I give talks to teenagers, but that's very different. So my clients are adults. Whatever the background, whatever the issue behind, is really about, as a coach, expats or people trying to adjust to a new culture, a new mentality, having issues, career change issues, for instance, anything that needs to be oriented that needs to get solution-oriented results.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear? As a counselor, it's a bit different. As a therapist, it's really very different. So to answer the question you asked a bit sooner, as a counselor, it's very different or as a therapist, because actually you assess the different dynamics the client is going through in the here and now. So the different dynamics, I mean, with the workplace, with any forms of friendship, with the parents, etc., etc. So you assess the different dynamics, and then you go further down to understand the roots of the issue. So you really get to the bottom of the issue psychologically. So you may go to childhood to understand the attachment bonds the person has formed. So it really goes deeper psychologically. While as a coach is only offering solution-oriented techniques.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose the kind of counseling approach that you do is what we call a psychodynamic counseling. Is that right?
Absolutely, and integrative. So actually, my training was psychodynamic, But the fact that I was, of course, I do different professional development trainings and courses, sorry, trainings and courses. So that's the reason why I'm able to use some CBT techniques and also humanistic techniques as well. My baseline is loss and grief. So loss and grief doesn't mean only losing someone you love, but it really means any major transitions you have to face in your life. So that could be career change, expatriation, repatriation, the loss of a loved one, of course, the loss of a pet. It could be retirement. It could be even positive events, just like a wedding, because there is a loss of your single life. So there is any major transition in your life that leads to a loss of a phase and the loss of a cycle to start a new one.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to touch upon, you just mentioned experts and you work with experts, but could you just give us a more, a bigger picture of what do you actually work with experts and, the kind of difficulties and experiences that they do, and of all the groups that you could possibly work with, why did you choose to work with experts?
Not only with expat, as an expat coach, intercultural coach, I work with expat, but as a counselor, I work with adults. So they don't have to be expats, of course. And I do also work with companies who need to understand the intercultural dynamics within their teams. So it's not only with expats, it's really anything that has to do with cultural differences. Because the main issue is not being an expat. Expats at times, like when I moved to London, it went really well for me. It's really about facing cultural differences that you're not able to grasp and that you don't understand. So for some expats, for many, depending on the country and depending on the mentality, depending on their psychological background as well, depending on their own training, when they move into a host country, the differences, the mentality differences, the languages differences as well, anything that doesn't sound natural is a true challenge for the expat. So it could be the workplace, because the work codes, the way you work in France, for instance, is very different than the way we work in England. The way you network is totally different in France than it is in England, simply because the social codes are totally different. And there are things that are not accepted in France that are in England and the other way around. So it's very important to understand the differences in culture and in mentality to be able to adjust to a new culture and be accepted and understood. So for many, for one, there is what is called culture shock. So the very beginning is just like, it's fantastic, it's new, it's so exciting. And then you realize that the way you behave usually is not accepted by the locals. And you don't understand why. Sorry?
That's something I relate to as an immigrant, where you were saying, like, the novelty kinds of like wears down. Like
exactly.
the you say to the country. Yeah, but carry on with your point.
Thank you. And so once actually you realize that your identity in a way is being attacked or not being understood by the locals, you may be feeling like a sense of loss. And when the sense of loss starts kicking in, you may miss your friends, your usual habits back home. You may realize that your usual behaviors are clearly not understood in the new culture. And you may feel deprived of your own identity because the image the locals send you is not the one you're used to, and you dislike the image they send you. So this may cause psychological uncertainty, which is really tough to face in the northern culture and not having your family around or friends you can talk to easily around. And that's the reason.
Yeah, carry on, sorry.
No. And that's the reason why, unfortunately, we have noticed that there are there is an increase in divorce rate because as well, when you have to move abroad with your spouse, at times your spouse didn't necessarily want to come along and did it for you, for your own career. It could be the kids as well, having major difficulties adapting to a new school with a new mentality and new codes as well. It could be finding a job, because if you don't move abroad for an overseas placement, then actually it could be very hard to find a job, simply because the way companies hire people, the recruiting process is totally different. For instance, in France, you have to tick so many boxes that it's very hard to have all the boxes right when you're a foreigner. So it doesn't mean that one country is better than the other one. It just means that the differences are huge and can be really huge, and they have to be understood and accepted to be able to move forward.
And I suppose it also boils down to they just got different way of doing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to explore more about your own personal experience as a counselor, as an entrepreneur. So how do you feel about working in two different countries with apparently two different cultures?
Yeah.
So could you just give us some examples? Earlier you alluded to the fact that some things might be acceptable in France but might not be acceptable in Britain. So could you just give us some specific examples?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I love working in both countries. Actually, I loved it because it's a true challenge. Both mentalities are totally different. So I have to adjust each time to the culture I'm in. Of course, I'm still myself, but I really have to adapt my company and my marketing to each culture. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, one main challenge, I will say, is I give, just to give an example, I give a lot of conferences, talks based on loss and grief. And that's something you can really easily talk about in England. It is widely accepted, and the emotional aspect you have to go through is widely accepted in England. And each time I want to give a talk, for instance, the latest one was for the English National Ballet School, and they were asking for that. So that's something, there is a need, and I can meet this need. Well, in France, is talking about death, talking about loss, talking about emotions is really, really hard. It's a country which repress emotions in a way. So it's not that they're not aware of, it's simply that you don't talk easily about that. So it's very hard because it's my baseline. So it actually is harder for me in France than it is in England, because my way of working, my way of marketing, my way of is very much British. Mm-hmm. So for me, the true challenge is actually not England, it is France. Mm-hmm. Because I have to adjust all the time.
Yeah, it sounds actually quite ironic, because you actually, if I get it right, you spend most of your time in France. So is it really split halfway?
But the thing is, as I said, I was raised in international and American context. Mm-hmm. So my background is Anglo-Saxon. It's not really about where you live. It's how you live your life in the country you're in. For instance, most probably in England, there are people who will feel more, French or while living in England. Well, it's exactly the same here. I had an Anglo-Saxon background. The way I was raised was Anglo-Saxon. So, as I said, when I moved to London, it was for me heaven because I thought it was my place. Well, in France, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's not, so I have to adjust all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's move on to a different topic, Margareth. I just want to understand more your approach as a counselor and as a therapist. So, do you predominantly work online, or do you work face to face?
I do both. Of course, right now I'm online, but I do both. The fact that I have a lot of clients actually more from abroad. So I work more online, I will say, in general, because most of my clients are from abroad. Most of my sessions are in English. But I do give in-person sessions in Paris as well. And well, to expats actually, even in France, usually they love working online. It's more about French people who prefer usually to have in-person sessions.
I see. So, can you just talk us through the pros and cons of working online versus working face to face? Well, I suppose you know, you have to adapt it because, you know, as you mentioned, some French people prefer working online. But could you just give us, you know, like an outline of what's the pros and cons of, you know, choosing one over the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So mainly I work in English. So as I said, most of my work is online. And the differences are simply, there are many differences. First of all, the difference for the client is that the client is in his place or her place. So as a professional, you have to be really cautious about that and trying to find a way with the client that actually, if the call is made, the session is occurring in his or her place, obviously, then it's really important to find a way that the client is able to move on after the session. Because if really tough topics are addressed, it's really important for the client emotionally to be able to move on. And right after the session, you see what I mean? So that's one point. In-person sessions, it's easier to handle that because obviously it's in a professional room in a way. It's in the office or it's in the room you rent. So it's easier. The client comes in and goes out, and it's just fine. The boundaries are very clear in-person sessions. In online sessions, you have to be really clear as a professional on boundaries, and it has to be clear right from the start. And the other, something I've noticed, which is really important as well, is that in-person sessions, clients usually test the environment, is really paying a lot of attention to the environment first and to you, how you behave, how you relate. Online is very different. It goes deeper, faster. So even if their home is not felt as safe, they will then project themselves, in your place through the video. That is clear enough. And so the emotions expressed are really deep, quite fast, compared with in-person sessions. So again, the boundaries have to be really clear and very constant and very congruent. It's really crucial to keep the safe environment. The other point, of course, obviously, is in-person session, you see the person, the whole individual physically, while you don't online. So it's about finding other ways, because for me, the somatic aspect is very important too, psychologically. So
the body language.
The body language, the body responses, and the way the person behave physically during the session, it tells a lot. So online sessions, obviously, you don't have the whole picture. So you need to find ways to analyze what you have in front of you, and be, I will say, faster in your way you analyze things, and be able to describe them in your mind and share them when needs be with the client, and to check regularly with the client that what you have noticed is right, of course.
I think the important takeaway here is that if you're a therapist, you really have to consider what will work best for your client.
Of course, first.
Yeah. Now, Margareth, I just but based from your experience, I just want to know, like, what kind of concerns is the best for but basically what I'm saying is what kind of concern psychodynamic approach would work best for? Is it more for traumatic experiences, or is it more for relationship, or for cultural adjustment? What is the best use of psychodynamic approach?
It's for everyone, really. The psychodynamic is absolutely for everyone. It was based, psychodynamic is the extension of psychoanalysis, and then it has evolved and it's wider. So no, it's for everyone. Obviously, it's psychology. It's obviously for everyone. Then I will say it depends more on the. And as I said, I'm integrative. I'm not only psychodynamic. That was my training, but I'm an integrative counselor. So I use different approaches. So that's very important to understand as well. So my training was psychodynamic, and then I did different CPDs that actually I'm integrative. So I will say the main important point here is not you applying your theory or approach onto the client. It should not work that way. It's more the client telling you or sharing with you her or his experiences, and you absorb them, you try to understand them, but in no way you force your own approach onto the client. So it's really about the client sharing experiences, and it's a partnership with the client. The client is really at the core of the session. It's not you. It's not you and your approaches. It's really the client. So then you adapt to the client's needs. It's really, really important for me. And the other point as well is it all depends on the therapist's personality. So even the client has to feel that the therapist he wants to work with, collaborate with, he feels safe enough with this therapist. That doesn't mean that the therapist is good or bad. It's simply a connection, a chemistry that you have or not. It's just like in any forms of relationship. It's still a relationship.
Now, I just want to understand more about your experience as a counselor, as a psychotherapist. You've obviously worked for a number of years now, but how do you cope with challenging clients? And also not just clients, perhaps with people who say, do I really need a therapist? I can usually handle my problems. How do you deal with these people?
Yeah, actually, it's more the case in France than in England. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen in England. Obviously, it does, but it's really frequent in France. People want to handle things, and especially the male clients, men, usually they really want to handle things and feel they're strong enough and not vulnerable. So it's all about, it's their choice anyway. It's really up to them. You're not going to impose your view on the potential client. But what I would say usually is explain what psychology is, how it can be helpful, how it could help them, whatever the problem is. And once they're ready, they can reach out to me. But it's not about imposing. It's just about explaining what it is really, what I can offer them, what they could get out of it, and actually saying that feeling vulnerable is a strength. And saying that not expressing your emotions and repressing them, because if you don't express them, then necessarily you repress them, could be really harmful in the long term for you, for your relationships, for your couple, for your work. It has really huge impacts. Maybe not right now, but definitely later on. So it's really about explaining that reaching out means strength and not the other way around. And expressing your vulnerability, your emotions, whatever they are, however bad you think they are, well, there is nothing bad, actually. It's all about interpretation. It's all about what you suffered from in the past as well. All that, sharing that, reaching out means strength.
You really put it so beautifully, and I suppose most of our listeners, because this is men's radio station, most of our listeners are men. They can that your message actually resonates with them. That vulnerability is strength. That One of the most common themes that we get to hear to a lot of people from your line of work is that, we should really treat mental health like physical health, that there should be no shame in seeking for
Excellent.
help of mental health professionals like yourself, that, seeking for help is just a natural way of coping with things. And thank you
Absolutely.
so much for sharing that beautiful message, especially for our listeners who are men.
Yeah. Yeah,
Now,
absolutely. And thank
mhm.
you.
And now, I just want to come to the side of someone who, who's looking for, okay, I understand that I'm struggling, so I want to look for a mental health professional. So what would be your advice for people who are looking for a psychotherapist or a counselor? What should we be looking for a mental health professional?
Well, different things. First, it depends the country you live in, because the requirements are very different depending on the country you live in, and the understanding of being an accredited therapist is very different from a country to another. So, first of all, it depends on where you live. So, anyway, it is best to check the training of the psychotherapist. You need to check the training of the psychotherapist. If you're in England, you need to check if they're accredited or not. What is the membership they're accredited with, and check the background of this membership body if you want to. Then some therapists apparently are not accredited, but they are excellent anyway. So it's really about checking the training they had, their approaches they believe in, how they deal with these approaches as well. So then it depends on and everyone, on any professional, how they share their approaches. Do they impose these approaches, or actually do they feel that the client will share first? So that's something you have to be in this session. Usually in the very first session, you will see if there is a kind of chemistry. And I will say, if you really have to be sure as well that the boundaries are well explained right from the start. You should not guess these boundaries. They should be really well explained by the therapist. So it's a training, potentially the membership body. The boundaries very well explained, how they see their approach, what does this approach mean to them, and how it can be understood by the potential client. And then in the very first session, to check if there is a kind of chemistry, if you feel safe enough, if there is understanding, if there is compassion. And that is very personal then. And that doesn't mean if there is none of that, that doesn't mean that the therapist is not good. It simply means that it may be it may not be the right therapist for you, which is very different. Because so many times I've heard clients telling me, well, I've seen many therapists before, but I didn't trust them, or so actually because I didn't trust them, they were bad. No, that doesn't mean that. It simply means that actually maybe this therapist was not the right one for this potential client, but that doesn't mean that the therapist was doing a bad job. You see what I mean?
Yeah, the way I would explain it is basically it's a dating game, like
exactly.
you have to find the right partner. It's not that you're not the right person, but I love the word that you use, some chemistries and boundaries, and I suppose from a therapeutic jargon, this is what you would call a therapeutic relationship or a therapeutic alliance. Yeah,
absolutely, it is an alliance. Totally. And actually, it should not be a kind of, actually at the very beginning, because then you've got different projections and transparencies, of course. But it should not be felt as someone acting like God or feeling superior, because it's not the case. We are equals. It's a partnership.
It's a partnership indeed. Yeah. So, how many clients, without going into details, but on an average, how many clients do you see, let's say, in a month?
Well, it really depends if I give talks or not, because sometimes I see them, but online. So I will say for now, it's about, 4 a day.
4 a day. Okay.
Yeah, 4 a day.
Okay, because the reason I asked you that, because I've never seen a psychotherapist or counselor in my life. I've never, I, I understand it's quite weird because I work within the mental health landscape, but yeah, I've never really felt the need to, to talk to a
I
mental health
understand.
professional. Yeah, but I suppose one of the questions that people would ask is that if you have so many clients, how do you, stay focused and care about them individually rather than just seeing them as, as a group?
Because I'm also a coach. So actually, when I say 4 day, is really a figure which is not right all the time.
Mhm,
I've got clients in the therapeutic
mhm,
orientation, and that in therapy actually is, so that takes longer. But as a coach, it's from 5 to 10 sessions, so you need to have clients way more often. And then I if and then it's the client's choice. If the client feels that, and don't forget that I deal with expats as well. So
mhm,
sometimes expats just stay in the host country for a year or two. So if they don't want to work online later on, or they feel that they don't need to anymore. So it's not like you're having a company with the same client that you're having a contract and it lasts for years. So it really depends. Well, now with the COVID-19, for instance, I've lost some clients because financially they're very worried. So it's just like they're in pause mode.
mhm,
Uh, so it really depends. And others will like more sessions actually than usually because they're feeling extremely anxious due to the unknown and precedented crisis. So it really depends on the phase of life, on the context. This is a global context, but it could be the country's context, economic situation, if there are expats or not. If I have a client as a coach or as a therapist, it doesn't work the same way. I would just wanted to say something when you said you had never seen a therapist, and
yeah.
I loved it actually because if I want to be perfectly honest with you, I was fond of psychology.
Mm,
And as I said, I started to, it was a passion of mine at a very young age due to my mother's sickness. And then
mhm,
my father got sick and died of cancer. So actually, that was a very important part of my life. But I decided to be in therapy because it was compulsory thanks to my training. I thought I was well, actually, they had no issues whatsoever apart from disease and death. And I was really good at handling them. And then, thanks to my training, I had to be in therapy. And that was really life changing for me. I realized so many things about me, about my past, about my
mhm,
patterns, that has been life transforming, really, for me.
mhm, mhm. But I just want to ask, as a counselor, do you actually meet another counselor for your own personal concerns?
You have to. Well, it's
Mm,
you have supervision. You
mhm,
definitely need to be in supervision because you cannot see everything all the time, and you may be wrong as well at times. And you need to check that with a supervisor. And to
mm,
be in therapy yourself, it's even better. Yeah, obviously.
mhm, good. Um, and if it's, let's say it's my first time to go to a counseling session, how should I prepare? Like me, I've never been to a counseling session myself, so how should I prepare myself?
Well, the first thing I say usually to people who ask me these questions is actually don't be prepared. Because it has to be really natural. You have to feel it. I work a lot on senses.
Mm,
It's really important to me to feel, to sense the
mm,
client's feelings, emotions, that at times issues I can sense, even if we
mm,
don't talk about them straight away. And I will say the best way is not to be prepared. You come as you are.
mm. And I suppose this is also the reason why psychotherapists and counselors tend to ask open-ended questions so they kind of like get the idea from the client.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. You need at the very beginning, and actually that's what I say to my clients in the very first session, that I'm going to test the water in a way as well, that we don't know each other. So the person is going to ask me questions which make sense, and I'm going to ask questions. Maybe they will feel confused about these questions whatsoever, but it's just about getting to know each other first. Again, it's a relationship.
And I suppose this is one of the most often asked question to you. Is psychotherapy really confidential?
It must be. Gosh, it must be. It's really. If it wasn't, that would be a nightmare for absolutely everyone. It must be. It is confidential. Absolutely, it is. It is confidential on so many different levels. Yes, definitely. If it was not confidential, then it would be unsafe. So it's really crucial to feel safe and to know that it is absolutely 100% confidential.
So how would you approach a situation where one of your clients said that they're going to commit suicide?
Gosh, yeah. First of all, and I know it's very hard because we all have these feelings, I guess, as professionals. First, you're kind of worried. Of course, it's such a huge responsibility, but you should not panic because you need to understand. Usually, they don't say that straight away anyway. They don't come to you because they want to commit suicide. They just first talk about the background, what they've been through. Usually, of course, well, in my case, at times those backgrounds are really, really tough and painful. And then you try to, first of all, you empathize a lot. You really sense this person. You really try to nurture this person because they don't feel nurtured. So they need to feel safe with you. They need to feel nurtured with you. Not dependent, but nurtured, which is very different. And then you try to understand if it's really a person who wants to commit suicide, really, or if it's a person who is asking for help, which is very different. And so it's really important to understand the differences and to be trained on that as well. So it's important to do CBDs on that. So professional development training and courses on people who want to commit suicide or who are self-harmed, and to understand the backgrounds.
Now, for those who have been listening, because we touch upon a very sensitive topic on mental health. For those of you who might be affected by that topic that we mentioned, you can always talk to Samaritans, and you can always talk to Mind. Just Google them. Okay.
Of course, there are many different associations, groups, support groups you can talk to. Then I will say be careful. Will you use support groups that are well known and then are recommended by either the government or a therapist? Because I don't want people to go online. That's the issue, especially with teenagers, and to go online and talk about their issues or talking about the fact that they want to commit suicide, and then they may be belittled or disparaged by other peers or other teenagers, and that is extremely painful because usually if they want to commit suicide, because they don't see any other way out. So they need to be helped properly, and they need to feel compassion. They need to understand that they are cared for, that people are looking after them deeply.
Now, one aspect of counseling is what we call active listening. For the benefit of our listeners, could you just talk us through what is active listening?
Active listening is is a proper exercise. I guess it's very hard to be an active listener when you're not a professional, because we all have the tendency to have our own opinions, visions, judgments, way of life. So to be an active listener is actually to listen fully and entirely, and without any judgment. So really absorb what the person wants to tell you, wants to express, without cutting off the person without trying to judge a person, and at times not even trying to reassure the person. The person may just want to express his feelings, but doesn't need necessarily at the specific time a solution. Maybe sometimes it's really about listening to the person, because so many times I can see people who give unsolicited advice, and that is not listening.
Mm-hmm. So that I suppose it's not really active listening. You're just simply hearing what the other person is saying.
No, it's not hearing, because hearing you don't listen. It's really about listening carefully, passionately, and without projecting your own judgment, vision, education, upbringing. That is active listening. It's really actually ignoring your own visions, projections, thoughts, to absorb what the client or the person is telling you, and try to understand the person who being in their shoes, actually.
I see. Now, for my last set of questions to you, Margareth, I just wanna, get some idea for, give some idea for those people who are planning to work in this sector. So, based from your experience, what are the pros and cons of working within the mental health sector?
Well, the pros are obviously it's extremely rewarding. Extremely rewarding. You give a lot. You give really a lot. But you receive a lot as well. It's extremely rewarding, and you feel you can make a difference, which is absolutely fantastic as well. If it's not right now, it may be later on, but you sense that you're changing things that are relevant, of course, to the person. The cons, there are many as well. First, because you absorb a lot. Well, as I said, I work a lot on senses, so I absorb a lot. You really need to. You can feel drained quite easily. So it's really about knowing yourself, have a very good self-awareness, and understand your own boundaries and your own limits, limitation, because you can't overstretch yourself either as a professional. We all think, especially when we are training, we think that it's good to overstretch, but it's not. We should not overstretch ourselves. Otherwise, we're not available mentally and emotionally. So it's really about having a very good self-awareness so that you're able to understand your boundaries, your limitations, your flaws, your own vulnerability, your own weaknesses. And because you may be drained a lot. The other one could be financially. At times, it may work really well when you have a private practice. Other times, you may feel that you don't have enough clients. You don't know how you're going to pay the bills at the end of the month. So that could be an issue. So to be aware of that and to prepare yourself if you want to set up a private practice. If you're ready to have a private practice financially, if you have the right support, if there is anyone who can help you, if there are bad times. And if you suffer from disease as well, that's another point. If by any misfortune you all of a sudden you're diagnosed with cancer or anything else, or depression, and you cannot handle your clients anymore, that has not only a very strong emotional impact on you because you feel that you're letting down people you care about. But also financially, because obviously all of a sudden you don't have any money whatsoever if you don't have any proper savings. So there are cons, obviously. So it's extremely rewarding, a lot of pros, but you give a lot and you have to be aware that it's not easy. It's not because you give, it's not because you feel you're humanistic enough and you have a good self-awareness. You really have to be realistic as well. It's not an easy job.
Now, I just want to move swiftly on from another aspect of what you do. You mentioned earlier that you're a creative entrepreneur. So what kind of work do you do as a creative entrepreneur?
Creative, because I will say I said creative on my website because it's more about me. I'm very creative. So I don't know if it's related to entrepreneurship really, but I'm very creative. I had set up, as I said, my own company in London, which was all about organizing bespoke events based on culture. I'm a dancer. I was raised in an international American environment, but an artistic one as well. Very artistic. My mother used to be a model. My father was what we call a library rat, so absolutely very intellectual, very artistic as well. My mother is now a painter. So I was raised in a very creative environment as well. And I try, especially when I do coaching, I really try to be creative in the exercises I give, in my way of relating with the client, and to give a kind of and to be able to trigger creativity in my clients as well, because I think it's really helpful when you go through really low phases to feel this creativity within you. It can be really something you can hold on to.
Now, aside from being a counselor and being a creative entrepreneur, you also give talks in London and Paris. So
Yeah.
for those who are listening, what can they expect from these talks?
Well, when I give this talk, so depending on the topic, of course, always first try to explain the different psychological models and where it comes from, how it developed historically and psychologically, and then I give tips as well. So it's not about only giving a talk and explaining the history of the psychological theories, but it's also about offering tips that can be helpful on an everyday basis, depending on the theme, of course. And it's always very interactive. So I've had different age groups, different cultures, and it's always very interactive. If the person, I always say right at the beginning, I always say that if people feel safe enough and they want to share their own experiences, they want to give tips as well to other people in the audience. If they want to participate, it's even better. So I really encourage participation and to have a kind of relationship. Even for I'm the speaker, I really want to have different forms of relationships with my audience. So it's very interactive, and it has been really helpful because I've understood things differently as well, depending on the culture, depending on the background, and I realize things. For instance, with expat clients, that for those who have moved to a country and to another, actually have been expats in different countries, most of them they feel that their home country is actually one of these host countries. It's not their home country anymore. You see what I mean?
Yes.
For instance, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can understand that because I live in 5 different countries before coming here in the UK, so it's kind of really sometimes you kind of lost where your grounding is, where your root is.
Exactly.
You
Absolutely,
know,
and it's fine. Yeah, and it's totally fine. That's what I keep saying. As long as you find yourself and you think it's good for yourself, it's not about where you're wrong. It's about really how you feel about the country you love. It could be the country you live in right now, but it could be any other country you lived in the past.
Now, Margareth, obviously I can't get away without asking you this question. As we have entered this, unprecedented crisis, the COVID-19, do you offer any specific services related to self-isolation?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I've just created a Facebook group actually, which is called Expats Adjusting to a New Culture, a support group. But within this group, which is not only for expats, but for locals who want to support expats in their own country, I offer tips, a tip per day on how to go through self-isolation mentally, obviously. On my Facebook page, what I will say is there are cognitive techniques that may help you to keep a kind of routine when you are self-isolating And of course, exercise is just like visualization, meditation, acceptance coping techniques. All of this, I do explain them, so that can be helpful. So this is for free. On Mondays, every Monday during the lockdown or shutdown, depending on your country, I offer free sessions on Mondays, every Monday during the crisis, because I can understand that for some people, it's just a one-off session they need because they feel very anxious and they need a kind of support. And I've also, what I've been doing is that I've also offered a discount on my on this for all new clients on sessions I give during the week, which means it's 40 euros for per session instead of 80. So yeah, so it's half price because I know it's really well. In France it's under lockdown, in England it's shut down. And I can really feel this anxiety everywhere about financial worries, total uncertainty about the future, the economy, how we will adapt. We have no idea. No one has. So I really want to help because it's really unprecedented times.
And actually, in times of crisis, this is when you realize the important role that people on your line of work are actually doing. Now, I just have one interesting question. Well, when it comes to mental health, what do you think is one thing that we don't often talk about?
Again, it depends on the culture. So I'm sorry about saying that, but I've seen so many differences. In France, for instance, I will say is because we're under lockdown, it is say a lot of time you have to stay home, you have to stay at home, etc. But people don't realize, and that is really tough mentally to stay at home. Depending if you're alone in a tiny flat, the mental health impact will be different on you than someone who has a big house with a garden. It's the same, of course, in England. But in England, we do talk a bit more about the emotional and mental health impact. I will say as well for people over 70s, it was said at some point in England that people over 70s needed to be locked down for about 12 weeks. Again, people over 70s, they don't necessarily use online support or talk online with their friends. They may feel extremely isolated. So that could be absolutely terrible on them. Then the lack of physical exercise. Of course, you can work out at home, but then maybe you don't have space to do so. So it will have an impact on your mental health as well. So definitely you need to be supported right now, even if you feel good because it's the very beginning. We don't know how long it's going to last, and you need to feel supported. So that is really crucial. And there are techniques. There are ways to do so.
Okay. Now, Margaret, we're already nearing towards the end of my interview with you. It's been really lovely chatting with you. But could you just invite our listeners on where can we learn more about your work?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for asking. Well, definitely on my website, which is polychromatic-lifedesign.com. My Facebook page, Polychromatic Life Design. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram as well, Polychromatic Life Design. My name is Margareth Van Steenlandt, so you can actually check on Facebook as well because this is my professional profile. And I, of course, write for UK mental health publication, just like Psychreg. So you definitely can read my articles on Psychreg and on Medium as well, the American platform Medium. I do write articles there, so you can find tips. I offer free tips, and I have a blog on my website where I do offer tips as well.
Now, since you mentioned Psychreg, I just want to invite listeners. I'm managing Psychreg. So just go to the website. That's www.psychreg.org. And more recently, I just published a book. So just go to Amazon and look for my name. And I also do a YouTube channel where I pretty much do the same. I interview people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Now, for those of you who actually missed the start of this channel, you can always tune into the website, and you can also listen to SoundCloud. It's been really lovely chatting with you.
It was really lovely. Thank you very much for offering me this opportunity. I do appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, we've learned a lot of things about counseling, about psychotherapy, and obviously about differences in working in different cultures.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that has something to bear in mind. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed it fully.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you again. This is Dennis Relojo-Howell here on Psych Chat at Men's Radio Station. See you again next week, and do look after yourself.